Howdy everyone, it's Sam. I hope you're doing really well. If you're new around here, I hope I can get you to consider liking the content and subscribing to the channel. And if you are a regular around these here parts, thank you very much for the continual support. This is my list of the top 22 matches of the NRL of season 2022. State of Origin, international games are not going to be a part of this list. However, that should not stop you to go check out matches like Papua New Guinea versus Fiji that happened earlier this year. We all know how good Game 1 and Game 3 of State of Origin was, and the Women's State of Origin game that happened earlier on this season was highly entertaining. So go do yourself a favor and go check out all those rep games as well. Now, there's also another component to this. So I've really sifted through the sands, through the dirt, and there are 3 teams that do not feature in the 22 best games of 2022, in my humble opinion. And they are Newcastle, New Zealand Warriors, and the Brisbane Broncos. So I want to now just show them a little bit of love and talk about their best performances, or their best games, I should actually say, that they featured in throughout 2022. Starting with the Brisbane Broncos, probably the most controversial of those 3, well, without a doubt, actually. I think the best game that the Brisbane Broncos were involved in for the entire season was back in round 2. The Brisbane Broncos travelled down to Accor Stadium to take on the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. Bulldogs were coming off a win. Broncos won in round 1 as well. And I think the contest between the Dogs and Broncos was played at a really good, frenetic pace. And I think the Broncos also had Adam Reynolds' debut for the club in that game as well. It just there are so many games that were fantastic in 2022, and this game that pitted the Bulldogs and the Broncos up against each other, if I was doing a top 30, it'd probably be in the top 30, but it's not in me top 22. So the best game, or the most entertaining game for me to see the Broncos play this season, was the contest that pitted them up against the Bulldogs, and they won that game 16 points to 10 in round 2 against the Bulldogs. The Newcastle Knights, they were arguably the toughest team to watch. Sorry to any Newcastle fans out there, but they probably were the most toughest team to watch. Newcastle Knights' most entertaining game, in my opinion, came in round number 17, where the Knights hosted the South Sydney Rabbitohs. And I even tipped the Newcastle Knights to get the dub against the South Sydney Rabbitohs due to it being an Origin player-affected contest. And the Knights, man, if they had a fair income decent halfback, or if Kalen Ponga was playing in this game, they probably win. But they leaked 40 points, scored 28 of their own, lost this game. But I thought, of all the games that the Knights played in 2022, this was probably their most entertaining game to sit down and watch. And then for the New Zealand Warriors, look, if it wasn't Newcastle, the Warriors were pretty bad to watch this season. The Warriors, though, there are 2 games that stick out to me. I guess for memorable purposes, you've got to put in Warriors and Tigers, but it wasn't a crash hot game that I couldn't feel comfortable putting in to the best 2022 games of the season, or 22 games of the 2022 NRL season. So I'd say the Warriors game against the West Tigers in that homecoming game was highly memorable, but that wasn't really close. It wasn't terribly entertaining. It was just a really good feel-good moment. Probably their most entertaining game that they featured in this year, and just barely misses out, mind you, on my top 22 games of the year, was the win against the North Queensland Cowboys in round number 5 in Golden Point extra time. It was a game that the Cowboys half-handed to the Warriors there, and Sean Johnson absolutely belted the stitching out of the ball to send the pill over the goalposts and get the 1-point victory for the Warriors in round 5, 25 points to 24. So just to reiterate, I think the Broncos' most entertaining game of the year was their victory against the Bulldogs in Sydney. The Newcastle Knights' loss against South Sydney Rabbitohs in round 17 was probably the most entertaining game that they played this year. And for the New Zealand Warriors, you can take your pick between either their homecoming game against the West Tigers halfway through the year, or the win against the North Queensland Cowboys back in round 5 in Golden Point extra time. So that's just some love towards those 3 teams who do not feature in my list of the 22 best games of 2022. Let's get stuck into the list with number 22. Number 22, South Sydney Rabbitohs versus the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles from Central Coast Stadium in round 8. The Rabbitohs prevailing 40 points to 22. The Manly Sea Eagles had a great account of themselves in this contest, albeit losing by 18 points and leaking 40. They played the game with one man down when Carl Lawton was sent off for a really awkward tackle on Cameron Murray, sending him horizontal. But the Manly Sea Eagles found a way to hit the front halfway through that game. The game was memorable for its pace and for how much heart and grit and toughness the Manly Sea Eagles put on display for everyone to see in this game. And for me personally, South Sydney versus Manly in round 8 from Central Coast Stadium is the 22nd best game of 2022. Number 21, North Queensland Cowboys versus the West Tigers from round 19. The Cowboys prevailing 27 points to 26. This game is more memorable for the final seconds of the game. Technically, throughout the entire contest, the Cowboys' completion rate was down. The West Tigers ebbed and flowed throughout the contest, and they were probably the better side in this game as well. I couldn't possibly put this game in the top 10, but if I'm doing the 22 best games, I think that this fits in very nicely as the 21st best game of 2022. It had to feature if I was going to do a list like this up the back end of the list. So the Cowboys versus West Tigers from round 19, the bunker, the all-time bunker howler is in here at number 21. Number 20, round number 10, Magic Round, the Gold Coast Titans versus the St. George Illawarra Dragons. The Titans winning in Golden Point extra time, 20 points to 16. Dude, I know a lot of people are going to be scratching their heads at this thought, but the rain was coming down that heavily during this contest, but the completion rates at halftime were upwards of 90%. I thought the defense and the way that they got stuck into each other was of a high quality. Now in the second half, their hands did begin to falter just because of how much effort they put into that first half. And defensively, man, they still got stuck into each other. And maybe it's not entertaining in the fact that there were points flowing and there wasn't a really good pace to it. But I just think that the amount of heart that both these sides put into this game was to be commended, bro. And for this then to go into Golden Point extra time, the way that the Titans, Jermaine Azako scored that try in the corner with not very little time left as well. I just think it's an absolute credit to these two sides for what they put on throughout torrential conditions. So number 20, the Titans versus the Dragons from Magic Round. Number 19, round 8, the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs versus the Sydney Roosters. The Bulldogs prevailing 16 points to 12. One of the biggest upsets of the 2022 NRL season came in this game. A week leading up to this contest, Trent Barrett was under all sorts of pressure. Phil Gould came in and allegedly, reportedly, put on some antics and got the entire club up and going, completely fired up for this game. So Gus Gould had one of his famous speeches and it worked. The Bulldogs defensively were outstanding. They were under all sorts of pressure, in particularly towards the final 10 minutes of that game. The referees even could have buggered them up. There were a lot of people I remember that was saying 9 times out of 10 those calls go the Roosters' way. But on this night, on this day, and deservedly so, it all went the way of the Bulldogs. And I'll tell you what, if there's a game that Trent Barrett can look back on, while he probably wasn't the catalyst for the victory, he was the head coach, and he certainly had the spotlight on him as well with that famous double arms up in the air celebrating towards the fans. So in at number 19, Bulldogs versus the Roosters, Bulldogs prevailing 16 points to 12 in one of the bigger upsets and entertaining games of the 2022 NRL season. Number 18, round 19, Penrith Panthers versus the Canola Sutherland Sharks from Bluebet Stadium. The Panthers prevailing 20 points to 10. The effort that the Sharkies put into the first 70 minutes of this game was outstanding, and it was one of them games where everyone thought, oh my God, is this the springboard? Even if they go on to lose, is this the springboard that could get them into a grand final? Alas, it wasn't meant to be, with all due respect. The Sharkies leading at halftime, scoring a lucky try, or maybe both their tries, you could say, were very lucky. And then the Panthers came out in that second half and just took it up another notch and really showed their premiership credentials, man. There was obviously that famous head clash that featured Dale Finucane and Stephen Crichton as well. There was a lot of talk from a gentleman named Andrew Ferguson, who does Fergo in the Freak, and is also a champion fellow who does work on the Rugby League Project website. And he said that the Sharkies are probably one of those sides that has the attack to trouble Penrith. And that first half was absolute evidence to what Mr. Andrew Ferguson was saying. And yeah, man, I think the Sharks can still take a lot out of it. I know the season's done. They were hit out in straight sets, but still, looking back on this game, man, there is so much that they can take out of this and evolve, if they can, evolve from it and come out all guns blazing in 2023. A lot of people probably will have this higher on the list, but I just think that about a little bit through that second half, you just knew that the Panthers were going to come back and win it, and it was just all too much for the Sharks to handle in the end. So while people will probably have this higher, I've got this at where it is at number 18. Penrith over Cronulla from Bluebet Stadium, 20 points to 10. Number 17, round 15. The Parramatta Eels hosted the Sydney Roosters from Commbank Stadium, prevailing 26 points to 16. If I was judging this game purely off the first half, this is top 5 most entertaining, most brilliant contests of the season. It is definitely up there. That second half, though, man, I think there was only a try and maybe a penalty goal or so. It was definitely a game that definitely turned the water off. Basically, it was flowing beautifully in that first half, but then someone turned the water off in that second half, and she was just, it was a little bit disappointing in the end, and there were more errors in that second half as well, but that first half alone, it had to be inside the top 22 games of the season. And yeah, I've got this one in at number 17, Parramatta Eels versus the Sydney Roosters, 26 points to 16. Number 16, round 14, the Sydney Roosters hosted the Melbourne Storm, losing 26 points to 18 at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Much like the other game, the first half of this contest was coast to coast. Both these sides were breaking the line. Highly entertaining stuff. That second half, though, there were a couple of more points and it was a little bit more exciting. There was an opportunity for Satili Tupanua to score off of a kick and for the Roosters to go over and score, but he dropped the ball over the bloody line and the Storm went back up the paddock the very next set and scored a try. 26 points to 18. Yeah, it's 1 to 12. You could say it's close. It's still not indicative of how close this game actually was. And like another memorable point for me, it's really random, but that turf out at the Sydney Cricket Ground during this game, man, what was going on there? It was like a patchwork quilt of art or something like that. But this game is up there in number 16. The Melbourne Storm prevailing 26 points to 18 over Easts at the SCG. Number 15, round 18. The Melbourne Storm hosted the Canberra Raiders, going down to the Raiders 20 points to 16. If anything else, this game features one of, if not the best try of the entire year, produced by James Schiller, putting a kick in for himself 5 odd meters out from the try line, tippy-toeing out of bounds to come back in bounds at the final moment to put the ball down deep in the try line corner. An unbelievable try and an unbelievable effort from the Canberra Raiders, and it wouldn't be the only effort that they put in. down at Melbourne that got them the chockies this season. So this one is in at number 15. Number 14, round 23. South Sydney Rabbitohs hosting the Penrith Panthers. The Panthers prevailing 26 points to 22. The Panthers were without their main starters. They were a little bit battered, and the South Sydney Rabbitohs were starting to find some really good form. The South Sydney Rabbitohs got in front. The Panthers hit the try line with only about 4 or so minutes remaining through Liam Martin. The South Sydney Rabbitohs were really hard to wrangle in 2022. I still really don't know what to make of their season, but if there is a performance, or if there is one of those performances throughout this year that they can look back on and go, we can learn from that and evolve from it, it is certainly this one where they took the Penrith Panthers all the way, but alas, it wasn't meant to be, and this was a really, really entertaining game of football. Number 13, round 20, Sharks versus Rabbitohs from Shark Park. The Sharks prevailing in Golden Point extra time, 21 points to 20. Number 12, round 1, the Canberra Raiders versus the Canola Sutherland Sharks from GAO Stadium. The Raiders prevailing 24 points to 19. For round 1 action, this is a fantastic way to start the season. It was a dry, sunny day. Your man was actually in attendance at this one too. Really, really good game of footy. Full length of the field tries. Nico Hines slotting a field. No, it was Matt Moylan scoring a field goal as well that got them in front. But then Hudson Young, who had himself quite the year, scored the match-winning try in the final moments of play. This is a great game to advertise what footy can be like in the opening round of the season, because a lot of people think, people are still knocking off the cobwebs, and it's true, but when footy's this good, it just, it makes me so excited to see what's going to happen in round 1 of 2023. I cannot wait to see what that draw looks like, man. It's going to be fascinating to see what that 2023 NRL draw looks like with the 17th team coming in next season. But this is number 12 on my list, the Raiders versus the Sharks, the Canberra side winning 24 points to 19. Number 11, round number 7, Anzac round. St. George Illawarra Dragons versus the Sydney Roosters, winning 14 points to 12 to the St. George Illawarra Dragons. The effort by the Dragons put on in this game, man, was absolutely outstanding, and unfortunately they couldn't really catapult themselves, strap a rocket to their backs and really make a good year of it, because about halfway through this season they took on the Sydney Roosters again and they leaked 50 points. They scored a few tries of their own, but we're not talking about that game. We're talking about this effort here where a lot of people said that's the game. That's the Anthony Griffin coached game that we all really wanted to see. And the Dragons were absolutely outstanding. They had a couple of referee decisions go against them, and they were able to overcome that. I just can't get over how good this defense was by the Dragons. It was a lot of people didn't give them a chance. A lot of people really didn't give them a chance. I even think I tipped the Eastern Suburbs, but yeah, the victory by the Dragons in this game was an absolute classic and one of the best Anzac Day games ever, in my opinion. So in at number 11, Dragons, Roosters, Anzac round. Go check it out. Number 10, round 3, the Melbourne Storm versus the Parramatta Eels. The Parramatta Eels winning 28 points to 24 in Golden Point extra time. For me personally, a lot of people are going to have this a lot higher, but this does start the top 10 in position number 10, obviously. And this obviously has that extremely memorable moment where Ray Stone caught a bouncing ball that hit off the post after Mitch Moses tried to slot it through for a field goal. But Ray Stone pounced on it, scored a try, did his ACL in all of that, and got the Eels a victory. And Mr. Entertain House had an absolutely hilarious reaction video to it, and I suggest you go check out his channel and go and find it. But yeah, he went off, and deservedly so. It was a great win by the Parramatta Eels. Yeah, I don't know, man. Just the whole game, or what I do recognise, and it wouldn't be in the number 10 position if I didn't think it was a very good game. But a lot of people are going to have this in their top 5, I reckon, and that is very presumptuous of me. But I just, I've got to have it in the top 10. I'm going to have it in at number 10. But yeah, it was a game that it didn't, I don't know, the pace of it, bro. I just think the pace of it wasn't as fast as some of these other games that are coming up because we're obviously now entrenched inside the top 10. But starting off, number 10, Storm, Eels, round 3, Eels won in golden point extra time via a Raystone try. Number 9, round number 2, the Canola Sutherland Sharks versus the Parramatta Eels. Sharks prevailing in the final seconds to win 18 points to 16. This was the first game at the Shire in a few years, man, and what they got was gold. The attack from the Sharks was exemplary, but the way that the Parramatta Eels were able to fight back and even get in front was outstanding considering how fired up the Sharkies were in this game. Teague Wilton went over to score a try that got them level, and then Nico Hines from a little bit out left was able to put it through the sticks, and it was kind of it was exciting. It was enthralling because Nico Hines's goal kicking from round 1, I think it was, or there was concerns and questions over Nico Hines's goal kicking, even in this game as well, and the celebrations at the end there, and seeing the Sharkies players and the Sharkies fans all celebrating at the Shire for the first time in a few years. Definitely good stuff, man. This was such an enjoyable game of footy to watch, and like after the first 2 or 3 rounds, it was up there as the best game of the year. But again, we go deeper into what happened in 2022. But this Sharks Eels game comes in at number 9. Number 8, round 15, the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles versus the North Queensland Cowboys from 4 Pines Park. The Cowboys winning 28 points to 26. What an unbelievable game of rugby league this was. And my biases would probably have it in at number 1. But this game against the Sea Eagles is really what made people take a step back and go, oh, the Cowboys are actually fair income now. They just went to Manly, which is not an easy place to win, and they got the dub in what was a high-quality game of footy. And halfway through that second half, you thought Lachlan Croker's just sealed the deal in one of the best 10 minutes by an individual that the game's ever seen, scoring a double, kicking a 40-20. Lachlan Croker was unreal, but in the final 7 minutes of the game, the Cowboys went bang, bang, bang. Now, very fortuitously so, that final try coming to Valentine Holmes, it was a kick off the score. So the Cowboys scored their second of 3 tries inside the final 7 minutes. Jeremiah Nanai knocked the ball on off of the kickoff. That was wild in of itself. From the scrum, Daly Cherry Evans got hit nicely from Scott Drinkwater from memory. I might need to be corrected on that. Spilled his lollies. Valentine Holmes picked the ball up, sprinted 70 odd meters to score the match winning try. That it was such an enjoyable game of footy, man, and one of the better wins in Cowboys history over the past 4 or 5 seasons, to be honest with you. So, well, since 2017, definitely. But this is my choice for number 8, Manly versus North Queensland from 4 Pines Park. Number 8, 28 points to 26 to the bloody Cowboys. Number 7, finals week 1, Melbourne Storm versus the Canberra Raiders. The Raiders winning for the second time at Amy Park this year. 28 points to 20 to kick out the Melbourne Storm. It's an unbelievable record. They now haven't lost at Amy Park since 2018 or 2017. They're on a 4-game winning streak now out there at Amy Park. It's just unbelievable what the Raiders have been able to achieve. And this game in itself, they were on the defense for the first 5 or so minutes, maybe even 10 minutes. And the Melbourne Storm, they weren't throwing their best at them, but they were still playing really quick. And you thought, the Storm are going to bash over and score a try here. But the Raiders just held so firm. And yet I couldn't say that they looked comfortable with what the Storm were dishing out, but they were really zoned in on their defense. And much like has always usually been the case, when a team is on the defensive for that long and they repel the attack, they finally get the ball and they end up scoring a try. And that's just a a karma sort of reward for all the good work that they did in defence to keep the Melbourne Storm at bay. And it was an amazing try that was finished off beautifully by Matt Timoko, but bouncing off Cameron Munster to score a try in the corner. And then obviously it was back and forth. The lead changed a number of times as well. And the Canberra Raiders ended up scoring a try via Jordan Rapana, but it was a falcon by Sebastian Kris that found its way in the try line area, and Rapana pounced on it and scored the try. Can't be a knock on if it bounces off of someone's head. And so thank you very much, Sebastian Kris. This is a great game to watch, and we're really in the meat and potatoes of it all now. We're in at number 7, Storm and Raiders. This was week 1 of the finals, and look, we're going to go deeper into it, but it's got to be up there for the best first week of finals in NRL history, man. And this is one example of it. Let's get into number 6. Number 6, finals week 3. North Queensland Cowboys versus the Parramatta Eels. The Eels winning 24 points to 20. We don't really have to talk about this game, you know, but it was one of the more entertaining white-knuckle games of the entire season. The Parramatta Eels weren't really good in that first half, kicking out on the full a couple of times. Their completion rates weren't good. The Cowboys were down a man in the sin bin for 10 minutes, Jason Taumalolo just to mention. And then come the second half, the Cowboys hit the front. The Parramatta Eels came roaring back into the contest as well. It's amazing what finals pressure does to not only the players but the fans as well. Maybe if this was a round 10 game, maybe it wouldn't be this high, but considering what was on the line and considering how close this was and the Cowboys on the attack in the final 5 minutes, oh man, it was an absolute heart stopper. I think a couple of these grey hairs were a result of that friggin' game. So in number 6, it's the Cowboys versus the Eels, finals week 3 in the preliminary final. Number 5, finals week 1. Sydney Roosters versus the South Sydney Rabbitohs from Allianz Stadium. The Rabbitohs winning 30 points to 14. I am in the camp where I cannot have this in the top 3. I am not going to put this at number 1. This was so memorable for all the wrong reasons. We've not seen, besides State of Origin Game 3, we all have not seen a game like this in years and years, man. It's memorable for all the wrong reasons. The tries, the first half of the first half was very memorable. Roosters scoring a couple of points here and there, the Rabbitohs hitting back as well. And then that second half just dissolved, and that may warrant me putting it back into the pack a little bit. But again, we all haven't seen a game like this in years and years and years, but it is not the game of the year. I will stand by that. There's no way that a game like this should ever be advertised as the best game of the season, but it does come in at number 5 on my best games of 2022. Number 4, round number 9, the Panthers versus the Eels. The Eels winning 22 points to 20. The Penrith Panthers hadn't lost a game at Bluebet Stadium in 2 years or so. And it was the Eels of all clubs to go into town and get the dub. The Eels hit the front early. The Penrith Panthers looked like they weren't their regular selves. And like I alluded to in a previous game that featured Penrith, you were hoping that they were going to hit back and raise the notches up a couple of levels, but it wasn't meant to be. But that's not to say that it took any of the gloss off of the actual performance that was produced, because this is a high quality game of footy, a really memorable one at that too. The bounce of the ball did go their way though, especially for Dylan Brown, who scored that match winning try off of a kick. It bounced, it was allowed to bounce, and Dylan Brown ran about 20 odd meters to zigzag his way over and score. And all the people that were thinking Parramatta Eels aren't going to be top 4, maybe even some were thinking not even top 8, they won this game. And yeah, it really solidified at least their top 8 chances, and alas, they would make that grand final anyway. But this is a highly recommended viewing for any rugby league fan. And while at the time of this game, it wasn't considered a rivalry, Penrith versus Parramatta. Now that we've seen what's happened in the week leading up to the grand final and the week after the grand final and what these two combatants did, or what the Penrith Panthers did to the Eels in that grand final, I think now that you can probably consider Penrith versus Parramatta as a rivalry. And number 4 is one of the reasons why, because it's a pretty massive win that the Eels were able to produce on this occasion. Number 4, Eels winning at Penrith, 22 points to 20. Number 3, round 24, Melbourne versus the Sydney Roosters from Amy Park. The Roosters winning 14 points to 10. This is higher up on the list compared to the finals week 1 game that pitted Easts and Souths against each other, because it's not a blowout, and it was just as fiery, maybe a little bit below, but I think the defense of the Roosters, the whole game itself was extraordinary, man. I really enjoyed the way that these two sides belted each other, really got stuck into their work, and for me, man, this is one that can be looked back on a lot more than that finals week 1 game, really. A lot of context going into it, like you've got the Jared Warrior-Hargreaves and Nelson Asofa-Solomona battle within this battle as well for the 2 competition points. So for me personally, number 3 on this list is Melbourne Storm versus Sydney Roosters from Amy Park, with the Roosters holding on by a fingernail in this game. The second best game of the 2022 NRL season came in round 6 on Easter Monday. The Parramatta Eels hosted the West Tigers, and the West Tigers got their first win of the year, winning by a Jackson Hastings field goal, 21 points to 20. I still smile and I still really sort of shiver when I think about watching this game live. The West Tigers didn't get a win up until this point, and it was such a high quality game of rugby league, man. It was so exciting to watch, and maybe it's more so that I'm so happy that the West Tigers won, which is what may be leading me having this game up so high on this list. But seriously, if you could watch this game forever, in my opinion, from go to woe, and be completely enthralled by it if you pop it on once a year. I think this is such a great game of footy. Yeah, dude, I just think that this was played at such a fantastic pace, that the way that the West Tigers surprised everyone, and it was pretty evident by about 15 minutes into the game that the West Tigers were up for it big time, man. And while the Eels did play a level below their best, man, it's not to say that they played badly at all. Again, this is an awesome game of footy, bro, but it's not the best game of footy of the year. Let's get into number 1. Number 1, the best game of the 2022 NRL season, in my opinion, came in finals week 1 from the Shire, the Canola Sutherland Sharks versus the North Queensland Cowboys, and it was the Cowboys that got the victory, 32 points to 30 in the 93rd minute via a 40-plus metre field goal, a 2-point field goal via Valentine Holmes. This game had absolutely everything in it. Scintillating tries, brutal defence. It went until the 93rd minute, and just before full time came about, yeah, the Cowboys were probably guilty of a couple of those areas, like really off areas, maybe 2 or 3 in a row there. But before the full time whistle went, the completions were still upwards of 85%. It was a high quality game of footy, bro. And then you look into the percentages when the field goal was scored, and the percentages were still went down to 11 errors each, basically. Maybe the Canola Sharks had one more error in them. So what I'm getting at is that golden point period, that 13 minutes of extra time that was played, probably 6 or 7 errors came in that 10-13 minute period alone. But I can't blame them. Who could blame them for being that fatigued that whenever they got hit, they just drop the ball? Whenever they're making a dash up towards the defensive line and they get crunched, they lose the ball. I think absolute credit to both of these sides. there's not a lot of people that looked at this game and went, that wasn't good. But there was one where Dan Ganane said, let me tell you, this was a fairy floss sort of a game, kind of a soft, unfinals like football game. Bro, you are the only one. You are the only one that thinks that, man. And I bet you would put that Sydney Roosters versus South Sydney Rabbitohs belt 'em up finals game up there in number one. I can't do that, dude. Maybe you can, but to say that this was soft and unfinals like is a disgraceful comment made by Dan Ganane, bro. This is the best game of footy that you'll see all year, man. Now, you can call me biased. I don't give a bugger because I was so enthralled by this. You got the commentators that all raved on about it. Every man, woman, and dog besides DG thought that this was a classic as well. Dude, I don't think there's a better game of rugby league that happened this year that wasn't international or state of origin. State of origin, probably 2 levels above what we saw in this game. But I'm just talking about regular season finals, NRL competition contests. And I think for me, this is the pick of the bunch, man. This is an all-time classic. And I mean, how freaking good that it was the Cowboys that got the victory in the end too, man. For me personally, you got those tries in the first half. You got the defense all throughout the contest as well. The way that the Cowboys were able to strike in the final seconds of the contest to send it to Golden Point extra time via Jason Taumalolo, who was an absolute machine in this game. Oh, dude, I'm sweating. I'm starting to overheat while thinking about it. It's just all-time classic. In this game, the Canola Sharks versus the North Queensland Cowboys from Shark Park in finals week 1, where the Cowboys prevailed 32-30. This is the best game of rugby league in 2022, in my humble opinion. Yo, what is your opinion of my list? Please give me a few examples of games I may have missed, or games that you thought were the best, or hell, even let me know, talk to me about what you may think was the worst. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do a list like that. That'd be ultimate disrespectful. But let's have a conversation in the chat below. And yeah, let us know what you think of the list and what games you loved as well, and what was your favorite game of the 2022 NRL season. Thank you all very much for a fantastic year. And I was going to save this for my Cowboys season review, but I'm going to put it out now, considering I've been talking about the entire competition for the past half hour or so. Thank you to every single NRL player. Thank you to every coach, staff. Thank you to every member and fan. Thank you to all of yous who actually did the thing out there on the football field throughout 2022. You've absolutely entertained every single one of us. You all should be proud of the work that you do in the community. And even if you're a West Tigers fan, like, you've got to be proud of the season that you've put in, man. Like, just thank you so much for entertaining the masses. To all the NRL players and the coaching staff, thank you very much. And the Rugby League World Cup is still up and about, but we're all very, very excited already about the prospects of 2023. So again, thank you to you, the players, and thank you to you, my subscribers, for the continuing support this year. It's been a successful year, man, and I can't wait to hopefully hit 1,000 subscribers before season kicks off. If not, that's all right. But yeah, I'm sitting up at about 867 or thereabouts, and yeah, hopefully that we can hit the 1,000 before kickoff round 1 2023. But in any event, I'll leave you to it. Thank you all very much for giving this a crack. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully you can like and subscribe if you were new around here, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Adios.